Is economic growth always a sign of progress, or can it be a harbinger of destruction and inequality? This question, though seemingly straightforward, reveals a complex and often overlooked paradox. Welcome to the paradox of prosperity, the darker side of economic growth. To understand this paradox, we need to peel back the layers of economic growth. On the surface, it appears to be a clear indicator of progress. A growing economy signifies more jobs, increased production, and higher living standards. It's a symbol of a nation's strength and prosperity, but look a little deeper and you'll find that this shiny facade of progress often masks some harsh realities. One of these is environmental degradation. As economies expand, the demand for resources increases. Forests are felled, minerals are mined, and fossil fuels are burned, all in the name of progress. The result? A planet scarred by deforestation, pollution, and climate change. And then there's inequality. Economic growth doesn't always trickle down to everyone. Instead, it often widens the gap between the haves and the have-nots. The rich get richer, while the poor struggle to catch up. This inequality is not just economic. It also manifests as disparities in opportunities, education, health, and even life expectancy. So, is economic growth a sign of progress? Well, it's not a simple yes or no, it's both. It brings prosperity, but at what cost? Are we willing to sacrifice our planet and deepen societal divides for the sake of an ever-expanding economy? These are questions we need to ask ourselves as we navigate through the complexities of economic growth. We need to challenge the traditional narrative of progress and prosperity and explore alternative paths to a sustainable and equitable future. As we delve deeper into this topic, let us remember that the true cost of growth is not always reflected in GDP. Consider the Industrial Revolution, a time of unprecedented economic growth. But what was the real cost? Let's dive into the heart of the 19th century, when the world was in the throes of the Industrial Revolution. This was a time when our society leaped forward, driven by steam power, mechanized production, and the thirst for progress. The smoky silhouette of factories against the sky, the clanging of machinery, and the ceaseless hustle of laborers became the defining images of the era. But beneath this veneer of progress, the Industrial Revolution was exacting a heavy toll on our planet and its people. The natural environment bore the brunt of this economic boom. Forests were felled to make way for factories and mines, rivers were polluted with industrial waste, and the air became choked with soot and smoke. The earth was being plundered, its resources consumed without a thought for the future. And then there was the human cost. The gap between the rich and the poor widened like never before. While the wealthy factory owners and industrialists reveled in their newfound prosperity, the working classes toiled in harsh and often hazardous conditions. Children as young as 6 labored in factories and mines, their childhood stolen by the demands of the machine age. Workers struggled for fair wages, reasonable hours, and safer working conditions. The promise of progress brought with it the specter of inequality. Fast forward to the present day, and the pattern repeats itself. Economic growth has rocketed to unprecedented heights. Yet with it comes an equally concerning rise in environmental degradation and social inequality. Take a look at the bustling cityscapes, teeming with towering skyscrapers and sprawling industries. These symbols of prosperity, however, cast long shadows. They consume vast amounts of natural resources and spew out pollutants, leading to environmental degradation on a scale we've never seen before. A study from the United Nations Environment Program reveals that industries account for around 70% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, but it's not just the environment that's under threat. The social fabric is fraying too. The World Bank reports that the richest 10% of the world's population holds nearly 80% of the global wealth. The gap between the haves and the have-nots is widening, and economic growth doesn't seem to be the great equalizer we once believed it to be. Let's take a stroll down the lanes of some of the world's fastest-growing economies. In cities like Delhi and Beijing, the air is heavy with smog, a byproduct of their rapid industrial growth. The World Health Organization estimates that over 4 million people die prematurely from illnesses linked to air pollution each year. On the other side of the coin, we have Silicon Valley, where the tech boom has led to skyrocketing living costs, pushing even middle-income families to the brink of homelessness. These examples are not anomalies, but rather the norm in our growth-obsessed world. Economic growth, while essential for development, has a dark side to it. It often comes at the cost of our natural environment and social equity. In the race to be the fastest, the biggest, and the wealthiest, we're leaving behind what truly matters: the health of our planet and the well-being of its inhabitants. In the pursuit of wealth, our planet and its most vulnerable inhabitants often pay the highest price. What happens if we continue down this path of unchecked economic growth? Let's take a moment to consider the potential future implications of this relentless pursuit of prosperity. As we cast our gaze into the not-so-distant future, a daunting picture begins to form. A world where the chasm between the rich and poor widens with each passing day, where the relentless drive for profit pushes our planet to the brink of irreversible damage. The environmental implications of this trajectory are stark. As economies grow, so too does their consumption of resources, their output of waste, their emission of greenhouse gases. If this trend continues unabated, we're looking at a future where our air is choked with pollutants, our oceans filled with plastic, our wildlife driven to extinction. A world where climate change is not a looming threat, but a devastating reality, and the consequences are not simply ecological. Economic growth, as it is currently pursued, tends to accumulate wealth in the hands of the few while leaving many behind. The result? A future where social inequality is not an unfortunate side effect, but a deeply entrenched norm. A world where the divide between the haves and the have-nots is not just economic, but also access to clean air, clean water, and a safe environment. But it doesn't have to be this way. With a shift in our economic mindset from growth at all costs to sustainable and equitable prosperity, we can chart a different course. A future where wealth doesn't come at the expense of our planet, where prosperity is shared rather than hoarded. The choice is ours to make. We can continue down this path, ignoring the warning signs and sacrificing our future for short-term gain. Or we can change our approach, prioritize sustainability over unchecked growth, and strive for an economy that works for everyone, not just the privileged few. If we do not change our approach to economic growth, we risk creating a future that is wealthier but also more polluted and unequal. So is there a way to achieve economic growth without these negative impacts? This question brings us back to the paradox of prosperity that we started with. We've traced the footsteps of economic growth from the dawn of the Industrial Revolution through the realities of the modern era, to the future consequences that lie ahead. We've seen how the relentless pursuit of prosperity has left deep scars on our environment and widened the chasm of inequality. The Industrial Revolution, a pivotal period in human history, set the stage for unprecedented growth. Yet it also sowed the seeds of environmental destruction, with industries belching out pollutants and natural resources being exploited with reckless abandon. Fast forward to our modern reality, and we find ourselves in a world where economic prosperity has become synonymous with environmental degradation and social inequality. The future consequences of this trajectory are far from rosy. We're staring down the barrel of a world where the wealth of the few is built on the suffering of the many, and our planet is pushed to the brink of ecological collapse. But the future isn't set in stone. We have the power to change the course of this narrative. Potential solutions lie in sustainable development and inclusive growth. Sustainable development emphasizes the need to balance economic growth with environmental protection. It calls for a shift from our current extractive and wasteful practices to ones that are regenerative and responsible. Inclusive growth, on the other hand, seeks to ensure that the benefits of economic growth are evenly distributed. It champions the cause of social justice, aiming to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor, the privileged and the marginalized. These approaches are not just alternatives, they are imperatives for a world that is not just richer, but also cleaner and more equal. They demand a rethink of our current economic models and a shift in our collective mindset. As we strive for prosperity, we must remember to consider its true cost. Only then can we build a future that is not just richer, but also cleaner and more equal.